was virtually no academic discussion of gaslighting, and the philosophical literature contained only a couple of glancing mentions of the concept. Still, every audience member immediately recognized the phenomenon when I described it. Since then, the term gaslighting has entered the colloquial lexicon. It appears regularly in the pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post as a topic of discussion on CNN, on countless blogs, and across social media. There are so many memes about gaslighting that entire subgenres have developed. The Chicks, formerly Dixie Chicks, have an album titled Gaslighter. Its usage crosses virtually every political line, and there's been a commensurate surge in academic theorizing about gaslighting. When a term gains popular traction on this scale, the scope of phenomena referred to under its rubric inevitably shifts. Gaslighting, accordingly, refers sometimes to a quite wide array of ways in which one person might relate to another, while at other times to a fairly narrow band of interpersonal interactions. One might treat these differences as merely verbal disputes, but we shouldn't. For one, expanding the term to cover all the varied phenomena sometimes now referred to as gaslighting runs the real risk of what's come to be called semantic bleaching or concept creep, where a once powerful concept becomes little more than a tag of disapproval attached to otherwise disparate phenomena. In philosophical terms, it's making a thin ethical concept of what used to be a thick one. But there's an even more important reason to resist dramatic expansion of the class of phenomena referred to as gaslighting. There is a real, immediately recognizable interpersonal phenomenon picked out by the term gaslighting, and if we expand the territory covered by the term too much, we will lose sight of and lose our ability to name that phenomenon. Gaslighting in this sense, the sense so aptly captured by the movie, is different from lying, dismissing, or ignoring someone. It is very different from familiar forms of manipulation like guilt-tripping, and from familiar ways of making someone feel badly about themselves like shaming. It's different from not treating them as a credible source of information, and different from not taking them seriously in some other way. It is even different from brainwashing someone in the manner of a cult leader manipulating his followers into believing some outrageous falsehood. No such description of other forms of familiar ways of acting badly aptly characterizes what Gregory was up to in his interactions with Paula. When we want a quick one-line summary, we say that Gregory was trying to drive Paula crazy. A substantial portion of this monograph is devoted to spelling out, in detail, exactly what we are trying to capture about the phenomenon when we say that. Notably, this close examination is premised on the thought that gaslighting is best understood as a form of interpersonal interaction, rather than as a feature of social structures. To put it a bit starkly, people gaslight, social structures don't. That doesn't mean that there are no important links between social structures and gaslighting. Certain pernicious social structures, such as those involved in systematic racism and sexism, can play specifiable and significant roles in gaslighting. In fact, once we learn just what those roles are, we will also be able to understand why some have found it so tempting to, mistakenly, think that it's the social structures themselves that, as it were, do the gaslighting. A crucial reason to get as clear as we can about all of this is that in being a distinctive interpersonal phenomenon, gaslighting is also a distinctive moral phenomenon. In fact, as we'll discover, these two dimensions of gaslighting are inextricably linked. We can, to some extent, mark out what distinguishes gaslighting as an interpersonal phenomenon without making any specifically moral claims. But insofar as we wish to distinguish gaslighting from other nearby experiences, like conning someone or infantilizing her, we will inevitably in part be making a moral case, arguing that there are moral reasons to distinguish gaslighting from these other morally problematic ways of interacting with someone. Moreover,